Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special budget meeting. And if you rise and recite the pledge with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. Do we have any additions or changes to the agenda this morning?
No, we do not.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? All right, moving forward, we are now at limited public comment. If anyone would like to take a moment, come to the podium, give us your name, your whereabouts. Nothing. Chad's getting coffee, so he's not going to come and speak. All right, moving on to item number 5 already. 2025-2026 budget review of personnel.
All right, so what you're going to see in your packet is what we've been telling you for the last 2 years and longer. It's a sad picture. You want to say anything, Ben, before I go on?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that what you're looking at is a culmination of a lot of effort from folks in our office at a time when we're already stretched pretty thin. I can say for myself, there are multiple matters involving legal decisions that the county has to make that our office has had to weigh in on over the past couple weeks. Our normal payroll specialist is out, so Melissa has been stepping up to do that because when we lost our other accountant in November of last year, that was our designated payroll backup. So that's the fluidity we have in our office, is everybody covers everybody. But that also means that we're always one vacation day, one person being out from being in a critical position where we're struggling to continue moving forward. So I want to give kudos to Connie and to Melissa for the fact that we're here. Everybody got paid today, and we are busting our butts to do
We don't know
the
that
work
for
of the
sure
county.
yet.
No. So I would just add that to the discussion that we have today.
You good, Melissa? Okay. And I'll say, based on that, we are not the only office that is suffering like that. Obviously, you see Fridays were closed. Our office hours changed on the admin side. That's done for a reason. Offices are struggling. Whether people want to agree with that or not, we're here every day. All right, so here's to what we're looking at. By maintaining our current staff as it is today, using the projections that we've been using, so this is keeping expenditures at the level that they are without a lot of growth in like supplies, technology. This is the model that we used. And if you look in 2930, which is exactly what we've been saying over the last several years, it's a little bit better because if you see down here, we have a projected fund balance. We were at almost 9 million because we had so many unfilled positions and departments didn't spend out of fear. And then this year, if we project using the 3 million that we anticipated, well, it's about 4 million, that we anticipated, the fund balance would be at 5.5. Still have open positions. They're not filling them, again, for the very reason that we're talking about right here. But it's not going to change anything when we have to make cuts, because having your fund balance at a certain level doesn't matter. You've got to have cuts that are going to be sustainable throughout. So we've talked about financial stability. That's how we got here. That's how we ended up with the tax limitation proposal on the ballot. That's why we moved to a public safety millage proposal now. So in 2030, we would be in a deficit of 25 million. You'll see that maintaining the current staffing, we would be down to a fund balance in 25-26 of 1.7. That's not sustainable. We know that. You go into the next year, you're in a deficit, and it continues to rise. So let's go to the model when we talk about public safety. If we reduce staff in public safety, And if we remember, that's Sheriff Road Patrol, that's Prosecutor's Office, and that is Animal Control. So what I did in developing the budget, I took out all of Animal Control. So all expenses in the Animal Control Office and all personnel. I took out Delta Township is gone. I took out the road patrol. I left some positions in there, not having a plan yet from the sheriff in relationship to his budget. I want to say a few things that we have to have. We have to maintain a property officer. They have to keep the property that's secure for any cases that the prosecutor will have. So we have to do that. So you have to have the property officer and you have to have backup. I can't make the determination on what that backup and rotation is, how it has to be secured. Look at it this way, and if he's watching, the undersheriff might, be subjected to doing that, or the sheriff himself. Then I kept personnel related to court security. We know that we have one deputy that's dedicated. When that deputy is gone, right now it's being filled with overtime. So, which is a lot. That costs a lot of money. But that's going to happen because people are entitled to vacation and people get sick and go off on disabilities. That's life. So we're keeping some of the positions in there. I'm not saying we would keep them completely. We may eliminate all of them and have some other way to do things. We would talk to the sheriff, and I know, obviously, we all know, sheriff and I would fight to keep everybody that we can. So using that model, because, and I want to make sure this is clear, Delta Township contributes money to a contract. The county pays an amount. I've stated all along, that's a sound model to use because we're sharing resources and administration. So we're not doing anything bad. Delta's not getting this great deal. You still want the sheriff present in Delta Township. So I keep saying that because I think the public needs to know that. Let's not pick on a township that contributes a lot to the county as a whole. And we don't want to pick on the out county because they contribute the same, right? We're all paying taxes. So if you look at this model, we are still in a deficit of $17 million in 2030 because you're still having to fund pension. That's going to continue. So we have to take the employees that are in the sheriff's office, and I had to use a model. So part of this is the model I had to use. We don't know if it'll be a mass exodus of employees that are 1 to 10 years. They may just go because their pension isn't secured unless they've been here for 10 years. You're going to have employees who want to maintain their employment to get certain benefits, including the pensions that they've worked for. So you're going to have those deputies that potentially could bump into corrections, sore spot for corrections. So everything I say is not what we want to happen. So what I did is I took the higher cost positions, still using the corrections deputies' wages. Those higher cost positions are in corrections. So we didn't save money by some of those larger benefits because you could even have command bumping down. We dealt with it. It's a whole rodeo. It's very complex. And it's something that's on their mind on a daily basis. So this considers making sure that we can stabilize the unknown of what will happen. And then the retirement. So we're working with MERS. We thought we would have had it earlier to create, they call it a ballpark estimate. So they're going to look at our pension as it is today and what we're contributing and the number of employees that contribute and the contributions made by the county. Some of those are very high because it's not for the people who are here today, it's for those legacy costs. Like it or not, we're paying for that. That's our greatest share. I think our normal cost, which is for the people that are here today, that would work 25 years, our normal cost is between 5 to 7%. But when you look at the sheriff's department, you're gonna look at like a 25% contribution the county's making. For command, and this is not command's fault, it's not the existing employee's fault, for next year, it's 140%. So that's where you see your costs. That's not the command officers' fault that are here. And they're sensitive to that. We all are. This is a shocker for Ben, somebody who's been in HR and been very dedicated and working with negotiations. It's difficult. So what we did in a simple math, and Ben and I am so proud that we came together and had the same dollar amount. Ben came up with a calculation, which was very intricate. So good job, Ben. Saying that it would be like 2.4 million with a factor of 1.85 increase over the course of 2041. Using that model and then the model that I used, we come out the same. I'm putting in 300,000. So again, when you see these numbers, I'm sorry, get it right, 3 million. Jim, sorry. That's a joke. I'm putting in an additional 3 million so that we're not losing the cost the county's contributing for the employees that leave, and we're not losing the contribution so that's the county and the employee contribution, right? We have to factor that in. We don't know what that dollar amount will be. It could be more, it could be less. Highly doubt it will be more based on the calculation that Ben did. Yeah.
So I'll just share a couple notes. The thing that we're talking about is what we've discussed in the past, but you're seeing a calculation or an attempt at estimating it. This is that $1 of cuts does not equate to $1 of savings, right? Because of the long-term liability that's associated with the pension. So for every $1 you cut and save, we're calculating roughly about 58 cents on the dollar. We're still setting aside, because even though someone didn't hit their 10 years with us, if they go to another community and they get 10 years within that MERS system, then the 6 years they had with us, we're still liable for that. And the 2041 basis is based on we should be 100% funded at that year with how MERS currently structures their actuarial. And these are not optional under the current model. They're required contributions, so that's part of it too. There's not leeway with the board about whether or not it's the best idea, like we are obligated to contribute at that level. The other thing I'd say, this scenario does not take into account the public safety millage that's on the ballot in May, right? So we want to make that clear. I'd also say this is not notice to any union group. This is a budgetary discussion. Contractually, we do have obligations if the board were to take actions related to those groups. This is not that. This is the opportunity to come together and talk about what a future looks like. We still have our budget through 9/30 of this year. So for those who are watching or those who are listening, just wanted to make that very, very clear.
Okay, so when we talk about that, if you look at this line here, which is the retirement, so you'll see that we did not modify that cost into the next scenario of losing 76 employees, because doing so would have created an unfunded liability that would then put us in violation of PA 202, where we have to have a corrective action plan. After a certain period of time, then you have a financial emergency manager that comes in because you're not funding to the 60% level. So that's what we have to maintain, and we'll continue to do that. So again, we're at 17 million. That's losing 76 employees. And I say that with Delta, and I love them. We're not going to be able to maintain deputies under a contract in terms of keeping the 35 staff that they have. Because if we keep them, it changes the entire model here, whether they're contributing or not. It changes a model for what that unfunded liability is. So we have said all along that road patrol's gone, part of the prosecuting attorney's office is gone, and Delta is part of road patrol, and animal control is gone. Moving on to the next scenario, when I think it was Commissioner Barber talked about what percentage we needed to cut in order to stabilize the budget, which this is stable if you look here. In 2030, we would have a fund balance of $3 million. Obviously, mass exodus is going to occur, so we're going to have savings more greater than what we think, because people are going to hear this. They're going to hear the April 11th meeting. They're going to hear every other meeting. Fear is going to spike. Jobs are being taken more. They're going to want to get those jobs before there aren't jobs. So that could happen. So there's savings, but we're anticipating that we keep the employees we have, but we would reduce 98 employees, which is what we have said from the start of when we went out first talking about the tax limitation. And I'll quote former Commissioner Joe Brailer, who said, you're looking at losing 100 employees. It's a quarter of your workforce. This 98 employees, we also included reductions to external agencies that we fund. Those percentages that we used as a reduction may go up. One that we eliminated, which has been a hot topic in the past, is MSU Extension. We have a memorandum of agreement with them that is $156,000, and they're located in the 551 building. They pay for a 4-H coordinator and a clerical staff with that. They're regional, so obviously they are maintaining their costs the best they can, and they work with us very well every year. But that eliminates 2 employees for them. We will be eliminating, by doing this, employees in CMH and in the health department. There's no way around it. We will also be looking at cuts to, which $17,000, a cut to Historical Commission. I say that because Chairman Mott has done a lot of work with them. They do a lot of good work. It's only $17,000, but how do you keep that $17,000? We give money to the Conservation District of $33,000. We're going to have to make cuts there. The cuts that we used for CMH and the Health Department, which I know that there's been discussion from others, because first, for all the employees who work here, we want to take care of you first, right? Because you're our employees. When we're giving them money, we're funding their employees, which isn't a bad thing, and they're offering, obviously, great services, CMH and Barry Eaton Health Department. But if you're going to take care of your house, you want to take care of your house first. So the model that we used was a 30% cut to those 2 agencies, which will, based on a discussion that I had with Colette Scrimger, but it'll kill them. It's just a lot. They pay for a contract with Eric Daly, Information Technology. That contract needs to be increased. Eric has been working on moving them off of our support because we're looking at cuts, we're looking at changes. We could increase it, but it's an awful lot of work for Eric's office where he did not receive additional staff to do that. So again, in-house and the trauma that we're feeling here. But again, using this model, we can stabilize it to $3 million in 2030. So it's a model you could use. Like Ben said, we did not consider a scenario, and I'm not going to apologize, but I'll say it in a way that I'm apologizing because we don't have enough time to deal with the stuff that we're dealing with. And if we made a list of everything we've dealt with over the last 2 weeks, I think you'd be shocked because departments have needs. The things they're dealing with are, it's like nothing we've seen before at the county level. And they could all get up and speak about what they're dealing with. They're down people. Their employees are stressed. They have employees who are just like, I'm done. I'm walking out. They're tired. We're all tired. So stabilize the budget here by cutting employees, potentially more employees. The 76 could be more. The 98 could be more. And like I said, the 98, because we're talking about our people, does not include the 2 that MSU Extension would lose or any of the other outside agencies, because those are people, right? And they're important to those agencies, but we're looking at our people. This does eliminate positions that we are receiving funds for, both federal and state funds. So part of that is a portion of savings. Any cuts that we make to the prosecuting attorney's office or that we make to front of the court, and front of the court's got vacant positions and the prosecutor's office has vacant positions, those are funded by almost 67% by federal funding called 4D, Cooperative Reimbursement Program. So when you cut a position, you're not cutting 100% of that position. You're cutting that formula out. So again, that's why that staffing model can continue to go up. Melissa did an analysis related to the CRP funding for both prosecutor and the court, and we reduced what revenue would come in, so we would have to modify that as we get to narrowing the cuts further, and we would do that with others. We did not do anything to our youth facility, obviously, because those costs are mandated, right? And we have a building, which is a savings. It was state funding. It's a savings because we're not having to send kids out. We also have prevention programs over there that are keeping our kids from being in the actual residential units. So the cut we did make is in terms of the county contribution, general fund contribution to the child care fund. So the recommendation I'm making, regardless of whatever scenario we have, the recommendation is that we will not give any money from the juvenile justice millage, and we'll talk about that next week at Public Works and Human Services, that we give nothing other than the 2 required programs that the court has, which are truancy intervention with Eaton Risa and CMH. And then we will use all the rest of the money for the prevention programs that our court operates and does a great job in the facility, and the day treatment and community-based treatment. We did move, this model does include I won't call it a hit to the court. We're able to move our probation officers, juvenile probation officers, into the child care fund. That started this year in coordination with the court's analysis of the child care grant funding. So they've been moved. Those are treated as reimbursement of 75%. So when you see the 98 employees, you technically moved out 75% of 4 additional employees to a state-funded grant. So that's an additional giving of personnel, right? They're still ours, we still keep them, but we saved the general fund money. I know I've given you a lot to look at. The next thing I'll show you, and these numbers that I'm going to show you on positions, we know will change. I can say to Prosecutor Lloyd, because he's here, the only reduction that we made in his office of those 76 are 4 positions, 2 legal assistants and 2 prosecuting attorneys. That's it so far. Does that mean that will be it? No, and I'll apologize because he's here. We're looking at, again, 4 there. Animal control is 3. 1 of those, again, not filled. So responsible of the sheriff to not fill that position. Helps our fund balance, and it doesn't subject a person to a layoff if it comes to that. We're looking at 8 command staff in the county patrol. To the command staff watching and listening to this later, I'm sorry. Oh, you go.
2 detectives within the county road patrol segment of the sheriff's department, 11 deputies, 6 cadets, 3 records clerks, Then for Delta, command staff is 5, 4 detectives, 24 deputies, 2 record clerks. Secondary road patrol, which is partial funding with state grants, 2 reduction there. This is not just the Delta contract, but it's also the contract with Waverly, with Windsor, and I believe this would also be the elimination of our overtime contracts that we have with Oneida and I believe one village.
So all of these consider reductions in overtime in county, and that'll will have to be analyzed because again, we're looking at what it means for the sheriff of what he has to do to secure this county courthouse and the property room and anything else that he needs. Delta, 35 positions, they know it, and all the overtime there. Any of the contract overtime, this also includes like Waverly, Maple Valley Schools. It's any overtime we just basically took out. It's what we call reimbursed overtime. So that's a modification in here. So you'll see the cuts, pretty significant, right? When you look at Delta, the savings there to the county because of the contribution they would make, and this is an estimate for next year, utilizing the exact same formula that we are utilizing now. So that is using an SEV computation and a 15%, basically like an administrative fee. So that's only a $1.5 million savings. But it's the future savings that also brings for our unfunded liability. And then the MERS, this is the portion that we talked about. So we would contribute $3 million. Melissa did this as showing it as a negative so you know exactly what it comes out to in terms of savings. So we would be at a savings, and it's, I'll say pathetic in reality, because we've been utilizing grant funds. We have a contract. It's sad that with the elimination of 76 people, you're looking at 3.3 million savings. So then if you take the other 32 positions, you're looking at 2.6. Of that 2.6, that 3 million and the 600,000 has to factor in those reductions. That's where it could get tricky, and we may end up having to increase it with the loss of those positions. And it depends, again, on the value of the positions. It depends on which group they're in. But it's a lot of positions. And the 32 is not a one-for-one on staff. So if a position costs $150,000 with benefits, some of those are grants, and they're not included. It's not going to be a one-for-one savings. So you're looking at the 5.9 million, which then translates back up here to where you get to this point. So I know I've said a lot, and it's sad. So I'll leave it for questions for all of you, and any other recommendations. I don't, Chairman, if you want to.
Any questions? Okay. Mr. Haskell.
I know this couldn't have been obviously an enjoyable or easy thing to do, so, but I do appreciate the work you guys have done to put this data in front of us. My question, I think, is relating to the computer fund. Looking across for each reduction period, it looks like it's still the same amount in for the budget. Is that correct?
So what we did, because I don't have the numbers yet from technology,
Sure.
we use the current year, which is the 1.9 million. I know that Eric has made reductions there. But again, those reductions are not going to keep reducing, right? We can sell a bunch of laptops. We can we'll obviously be able to do with all of the work, do away with all of the workstations and the technology for deputies, the Axon body cams and vehicles. We can sell vehicles. That's another situation that's not in here. So all we did was keep it the same, because we have to be conservative in what we're doing. And if I don't have numbers for Eric going forward, which I don't, because their budgets are due today, then I'm not going to factor that we're going to have a big savings.
Right.
This does consider savings in some of the contractual within departments, knowing that they're not going to send people to training because they're not going to have people to send. So it factors in some of those reductions, some contractual items, but I'll use my office as an example. Our financial system is now to the point where we have to fund a subscription that they're not doing. So they're no longer doing this subscription model, so we had to anticipate that our costs would go up. I believe in this model, it's $150,000. That may change, right? Could go up from that, could go down from that. But we have to consider worst-case scenario. I can't put something out to you or the public that's going to say that, right.
I would prefer you do that, so
Correct.
I'm good with that.
So I want it to look better than this when we get to the end of the day, but you're also gonna have departments that are handing me their budgets next week. And I'm gonna look at those, and they're going to have, they were all instructed to look at their budgets as continuation budgets. But where everybody would say continuation budgets are easy for home, right? Because you just don't do these things. It's not when you're talking about technology. It's not when you're talking about the obligations you have in contracts. It's just not. And I can use Prosecutor Lloyd again. His personnel costs, he doesn't spend a lot of money on contracts. He's a moneymaker, and he maintains the least amount of contractual required expenditures as possible. So his budget is 97% personnel. So the cuts that you're making to his budget are people. So when I say 4 people, that doesn't mean that the 98 doesn't have additional staff,
Right.
right? So, and it doesn't mean that 76 will stay at 76.
Right.
But we have not gone through the budget together. Again, that'll all be done next week. So, yeah, a lot more to change, but I took out a lot. And then I'm gonna go further, but I'll let you guys ask questions. I wanna talk about some other things.
Yeah, I know from the IT committee days, there was a lot of talk about how, moving from in-house systems to pay-for systems, you have licenses, whatever else. I wasn't sure if, as we're reducing at the 76 model and then the 98 model, if there's at least some of those licenses are easy to predict on what ones would be cut out of there.
Yeah. And Eric hasn't seen this. I'm sure he's watching right now.
Thanks,
So
Eric.
now, Eric, that's the model that you're gonna have to work on if this is where we go. And he'll do that. And
Yeah.
he has factored that in. He's put together like a org chart for every department. And within that org chart, and correct me if I'm saying you did too much, Eric, but he's put that together to say, these are the pieces of equipment that go with a position, not a person, a position. And if that position is eliminated, there's a cost savings there.
Sure.
But our costs keep going up. So that's
Well,
just reality.
And to that point, we've underfunded the computer fund for years at times too, so I'm sure there's some catch-up that even needs to be done, so. Yeah. All right, thank you.
I would also like to say to that, some of that expense is also for replacement of very expensive pieces of equipment that are hitting end of life. So we will experience those costs regardless of how many staff we have. So I know for Eric, that's part of why this is such a substantial amount, and that's why we left it where it was.
But Eric has done a really good job, I will tell you, just from the conversation I had with him. I think it was last week, it could have been 3 months ago, I don't know, time flies. The conversation that I've had, he has worked really hard in considering every contract, every piece of equipment, and where we can save money. So I know that number is going to go down, but until I have those numbers from him, I can't use them.
I'm just going to continue around the circle. Commissioner Wright.
I just want to point out, because we also will have public watching, is that people don't realize the difference in the costs in operating even over the last 6, 7 years. And I remember back in 2017, we went to, everybody had body cameras and how much it was gonna cost for storage of that, up in the iCloud and things. It was astronomical, the hit that we took just in that little segment of operating the county, going to body cameras and everything that was gonna have to go with it, along with the FOIAs that we were gonna have to go through and all this. So,
All for the benefit of community and the officers.
yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Christensen.
So just to, I guess, reiterate to the public, because again, as we've talked about in the past at different meetings, social media is just an interesting source right now. People are under the assumption that if the millage passes, that money for public safety, which is what the millage is for, is going to go in the general fund and we're going to save these jobs. That's a total misconception and they're not comprehending that. That public safety money is for public safety. So I guess just to be transparent and get this out there, Connie, the first set of cuts you made where you were talking about the 76 to 98 employees, that's gonna happen regardless.
Well, so in terms of, and this, I've said it before, so I want to make it clear. There's a way a millage works. A special millage works because we can't fund the people in public safety right now. We're saying we're eliminating them. They're gone. So the millage, what it does is it puts those people and those costs into a separate fund. It is not coming to the general fund, but it is saving the general fund, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the whole reason that you're doing a special millage. Then what you want to do is maintain that millage over the course of time to ensure that we're meeting the goal that we want to meet, and that is to increase staffing for those departments, because we have heard time and time again that no one sees sheriff's deputies out and about. Well, of course you don't. You got 3 people on a shift, they're bouncing back and forth. They come back because they have to check in. They have to write a report. They have to deal with something. They need to talk to a command officer who may not be available because they don't always have enough command on staff at the time and events going on, so they're all called in. So again, you're just alleviating the general fund, and as I look at it today, because the millage will bring in 10.3 million in the first year, as an estimate that we were given by the equalization director, and he will update that for us in April and May. And the tax revenue shown here is the tax revenue that he provided us last year using a 5% increase to the revenue. Not to the increase to the taxpayers, but to the revenue itself. So, yes, it's not coming to the general fund, Commissioner Christensen. It's moving those people out. And that model I don't have today, because that takes me working with Prosecutor Lloyd, which he has a model. He and I discussed yesterday what that would mean for his office based on a study that all prosecutors did throughout the state, so he can tell what they need. What does that model look like for him if we don't have sheriff's deputies here who prevent a lot of crime, who catch people doing things that wouldn't happen if there were no deputies? You know, he went to a meeting yesterday that he shared with me that if he wants to get up and speak after, it's pretty sad and what our county looks like if we do not have people on the road. Because the state police can't do it. And that's not their fault. They don't have the resources either. So your expectation would be they can just increase staffing. They have their own staffing model they work on. They don't staff to fund communities, right? They don't. So again, back to what I was saying, you're looking at moving positions out. Will it be 76? Maybe not. Will it be less than that? Will it be more than that? We don't know right now. 72 in the sheriff's department, and 4 in the prosecutor's office is what that is made up of. But that means that prosecutor's just maintaining the 4 that he's not filling. And that means the sheriff's office is maintaining those that he has now, which means he's not staffing his road patrol the way the public should expect and is expecting. Because that's all they've been complaining about. We know that. So whether you care about having an officer in your community or not, that's a decision that you'll make. But that's what it means. You're not seeing them now. You're not going to see them if we keep this model the way it is. You're going to see them as that revenue continues to come in for a millage. That's a long explanation, but it's a very
No, but I
detailed.
appreciate that because, like I said, so many are under this assumption that we're going to vote no because they're not going to use it for public safety anyway. And they're not, I don't think they're grasping the fact that they're literally going to lose at all 3 entities within public safety if.
And I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone. I don't see people here, everyone that is here right now. There would be one member of the public that is sitting here right now.
Exactly.
So they're watching, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this message is the same message that we have been saying for years. This is nothing new. It's the same message. It goes back to 2017. It goes back before that when we were making cuts in 2008. This is not a new message. It's just that now public is paying attention. And bless their hearts for doing that. That's great. But we're not inflating or causing an issue that doesn't exist. The issue exists. And we can keep chugging along like we've done every year. We can keep filling that, what I think a lot of you and other commissioners that left have said, a magic number that just appeared. We can keep doing that, but all you're doing is playing with fire with your fund balance. It's not what you want to do. I will note, I want to make sure that you see this. The capital improvement in the budget, which we can remove. I put $1 million with a minor 2% increase. So what that does is that gives money to facilities management to start making some repairs, to deal with some of the bricks falling off the building, to deal with our sidewalks, to deal with elevators, to deal with anything that we're not maintaining. We have been criticized because we haven't maintained. We haven't had the money to maintain it. We have put $250 max into the public improvement fund. Melissa, I don't have the number, but I think it's at 1.3 million, and we're utilizing $4 million to pay for a contract that we have to. Are you okay? She's not challenging me on it, so I'm going to say I'm right. So if the expectation of the public and the board, and this should be the expectation, is you're going to set aside money. That model is in there, but I can pull that right out. All it's going to do is save you $5 million. It's over 5 years with considering a 2% increase. It doesn't do anything, but what it does do is leave us open to something failing that we can't afford, that then we have to try to get a loan for, bond for. We had to do that with technology when we didn't have money, and I know Brandon, you remember that, you would remember that. We had to go through an infrastructure financing, and we did it twice. So that's not the way to do business, but we had to do it. It's considered an interest-free loan from the vendor, but it ends up showing interest because that's how budgeting works with the bonds and debt. So again, this is what we're stuck with. I put it in there. I'll take it out when we get into further discussions. But if we're supposed to be responsible, which we're all saying we should be, public's telling us we haven't been, and the public is telling us we should be, that's all that is for. So it's $5 million. It goes into facilities management. Chad can talk about that, and the costs that are continuing to rise. And every time we put off something, the next year the costs go up. And I will use bank intercounty drain. Hot topic here in Eaton County for the entire county and for the residents that are being subjected to the costs. We would have done that 10 years ago, right? The costs would have been less. But that's the way things have gone in Eaton County for years. We've delayed, put off. But when people start losing property because of flooding, you didn't have a choice but to move forward with it. So I'm bringing up hot topics that we're hearing about, that employees are talking about, but this is the reality. And some of the cuts that people are talking about with leases, vehicle leases, we can toss those out. I tossed a ton of them out. What I didn't do is put in the, and that's just the lease cost. I didn't put in the amount that we would get by selling them. Now, when you're talking about a patrol vehicle, they are driven hard. They just are. Some of them are driven daily because they're the vehicles that are equipped for specific response, and they have to be on the road. So those vehicles are driven hard, and you're not probably going to sell those for much. We would have to sell them and pay off the leases, and then take whatever earnings. Melissa looks at me because it's probably not going to be that much. And then for other offices, we can sell those vehicles. Some of them are owned. We would pay mileage reimbursement. That gets difficult in certain departments because of the terrain they have to be on. Vehicles are not hurting our budget. Personnel costs and technology costs and infrastructure costs are where we're having the problem. And the revenues not keeping up with those costs. So.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yeah, just comment and maybe question. In training I had way back in the day, a presence of law enforcement will help reduce crime just by the presence of them. Just by seeing patrol out there or knowing that they're out there, as opposed to knowing that there's nobody out there, that's gonna reduce crime is the way statistics go. The question would be, first the comment that from social media, it says the safety millage is just going to Delta Township, and I'm like shaking my head. How can you even think that's? Would you briefly maybe say it's not, I don't believe it is, but what would be the percent, or is it just an overall, so much there, so much in the out county, just for the public that's going to be hearing that and seeing it? Thank you.
Well, I'll first apologize again to Delta Township.
Yeah.
This millage doesn't help them. What it does is it says to me, as administration, and what I think it should say to every commissioner, including the sheriff, the prosecutor, when we went on, I'll call our road tour, we said we weren't going to have that contract. I feel that the $1.5 million that we're looking at paying doesn't go to that millage. And I hate to say that because I know Delta Township is hearing this or will hear this, and they don't have the money either to fund additional costs over the 4.6 to 5 million that they might pay. They're going to tell you they don't have that money because, again, we've relied on a model that's cost-saving and beneficial to both the county and to Delta Township. And when I say the county, I say out county. So Delta Township's not in that model. That the 76 employees, it's going to be a value, but it's not going to be the people from Delta that we're going to maintain. It's going to be the people in county road patrol because that's what we said we'd cut. And on top of cutting that, we would cut Delta. If that makes sense. And then funding the prosecuting attorney's office, funding animal control, dealing with the infrastructure issues that we have at animal control. So this is not going to Delta Township. This is going to keep the Delta Township contract, right? But it potentially can increase the cost that Delta pays. We're not doing this for Delta. We're doing this for Eaton County. And I know I'm the bad guy when it comes to that, but my job, and I believe the job of this board, is to take care of the county. Delta's in the county, but not a police contract, right? So, bad guy, I'll take it, but that's the reality, because any contract that we keep continues on our liabilities, and that's the issue we can't control. We can't keep increasing those liabilities to maintain a structure that I'm looking at here. We can't. So, no, just take Delta Township out of the equation and quit picking on them because I don't like it, and quit picking on Elk County. You know, I could say the same for residents in Delta Township. We're one county, and yes, they have a larger tax base, but take a look at Ingham County. Look at where their tax base is, and yet they have people in their out county areas, and they lost road patrol years ago for those areas. So we're not any different. We just don't have the populated areas that Ingham County has. So Ben wants to say something.
I would just say too that part of what Connie's talked about is the price of having a Delta contract. We're able to operate and consolidate and save because we're able to stack the overhead in a way to where you can have detectives that can assist each other. You can have a property officer over certain things. If Delta had to build their own police services, the cost to Delta residents is going to be substantially more because it's not attached to an existing command structure and having that institutional knowledge on how to manage police operations. I'd also say if you just look at the dollar amounts, you can see that the cost to the general fund for services in the out county is $4.3 million, and the cost on the Delta contract is $1.5, and that is because Delta pays such a large share of theirs, right? So I concur that having a perspective that, you know, this is in some ways just going to Delta, we're talking about restoring 24/7 coverage in the out county, having all the shifts back, and we're already in a really good position because we've had those 10 cadets in FTO that will complete sometime in May, but the pipeline has slowed down on hiring because the Sheriff's Department has to be aware that this is what's on the discussion if the public safety millage doesn't pass, right? But it's been a staffing issue that's hindered coverage in the out county, and that is where you're going to see the biggest increase in coverage, because once we get enough bodies, the sheriff wants to restore that coverage. He just can't do it with overtime because we can't afford it and we don't have the people to staff it. I don't know if that helps give like an HR perspective to it, but.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Haskell.
Ben, you mentioned a comment about a figure about how many pennies on the dollar we save because of, you know, one person got, you know, could be funded by grant money. What was that figure again? I can't remember. Something
And I
about
will say
58 cents on a dollar or something like
This is
that.
an in-house estimate, so we weren't able to get the figure from MERS. But for every dollar that we save in personnel costs, we estimate that we're going to have to set aside 58 cents for the long-term liability cost of that pension.
Okay.
Now, that could vary. There are a number of factors, right? So if people leave, they have the option to take a refund out of the MERS system if they're not vested. If somebody does that, they're wiped off our liability sheet, right? But if they go to another community, they exist within the system. So for us, it's very difficult to calculate that out. MERS, we have requested a model be provided, and hopefully the next time we have a discussion on this, we can have that ballpark estimate from them. So, but yeah, just the idea being residents and commissioners, it is not going to be a dollar for dollar savings and 58 cents.
One other figure that I think would help in future discussions when I'm communicating to the public about this is we talked about a lot of grant funding that would be lost because of the jobs attached to it here. I would like to actually see what that figure is in grant dollars. I know it's a heavy ask, so if this is too much, then let me know. But specifically, where those grant dollars are suffering in relation to departments or services.
Yeah, and the grants that we're talking about are, it's not good.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
No, and that's.
So, yes,
I mean,
I can give you that.
Prosecutor
Ugly.
Lloyd and I, when we had dinner months ago, we kind of talked about this kind of things with specialty courts and whatever else, and how the dominoes can fall into that. So that is something that when I've been talking to the public, that I'm saying it's not, yes, it is public safety first and foremost, but it's not just public safety, right?
Right.
There's a lot of other programs out there that will be impacted, and I think when I can finally tie physical dollar amounts to physical services, I think that it'll help widen people's eyes a little more.
And we do, we applauding every office, they seek grant funding. And they do that because let's take the money and use it for our people if it's available. And we've been doing it for years, and we've done a really good job of maintaining that. But when you're talking about cuts, there's some of those programs that are not going to be available. We're not going to be able to do it. So, again, when I looked at doing this, that was bad, right? Going through it. And I didn't select, I did look at open positions. So when there was a position that was open, that's something that I could quantify. But I can't use some of those that are lower level, lower paid employees, right? Cutting them, it still increases workload, but it's also not a big enough cut. So we had to take a range from here to here in order to make cuts. It wasn't easy. And I know this doesn't work, but it was a start. So when we get into working with, giving a department a cut, it's going to be heavy in some departments and lighter in other departments. So it's just a sad story, something that we don't want to do.
Right. Yeah, and I apologize for adding.
No,
more,
that's
but,
not. No, that's good. The reason that we didn't do certain things like that, one thing, time.
Sure. Yeah.
I wish I could tell you what I've had to do the last 2 weeks. You would be shocked. But it's time, and it's also whether people like it or not, there's a sensitivity. These are people. You're not talking about a body. You're talking about a person. You're talking about their livelihood. You're talking about a passion. Because the employees here, they have a passion with their job. They don't come to work and think, ugh, I gotta, work. They're passionate or they wouldn't be here. The ones that have had to leave wanted to stay, but they had to take, the route to leave, right? So these are people. I was going to say at the top, I said reduce staff by employees. So staff and employees. I wanted to add by the hardest working employees because I believe that. I believe what you're getting are hardworking employees, and any new commissioner sitting here and the commissioners who've been here, if you've been to any department, you know that. You know what you're getting. They're working hard. So this is a difficult discussion for us to eventually have with departments. And there are some other areas where we're in a liability situation if we don't add a position. And I can speak to it because, again, the county clerk is sitting here. If we do not stabilize that office, she's in the beginning of a 4-year term. If we don't stabilize that office with somebody who's going to run elections other than Kim Morris and the clerk as a backup, where we learned that she cannot back her up because of her role, right? So we're going to be in a situation where you're potentially going to be in the media. And you don't want that. And the clerk doesn't want it. The state doesn't want it. So these are issues that you have. So somebody's going to get hurt and somebody's going to have to add something. And the clerk and the treasurer right now are working on some plans that would help. It's mostly going to help the clerk's office. But our clerk is doing a really good job of trying to maintain staffing, being able to potentially roll a part-time position into a full-time position. I'm not going to give away all of her secrets or all of the treasurer's secrets, but they're working hard, and you've got a brand-new treasurer, right? And he's hit the ground running. He knows what his office needs. He's willing to work with the commissioners, the county. You should be proud. I like to go off on these little tangents and get emotional.
I had a follow-up, but I forgot it a while ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm kidding.
Yes, you're right.
Verbally say like 2 positions over there, and Commissioner Haskell brought up, is that listed under other personnel reductions?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, if there's a position within that, again, whether the public likes it or not, or you like it or not, I didn't list out those positions. I listed out what we said we were giving up. That's all I gave you, because the rest of it, I have to work with the courts. I have to work with the other elected officials. And we have to work with departments in order to maintain staffing level that they can live with. Because there's a mandate, and I'm gonna look at every mandate. If something's not mandated, that's gonna be my first look, right? And then we're going to not fight because the people here don't fight, but they are going to fight for their positions. They don't fight with you, and they don't fight with my office because they just wanna do their jobs, but they also wanna save their employees. So you're one lucky board, whether you want to know it or not. You are very lucky with the people in the county that you have. You have elected officials that work with you. I'll give kudos to the courts. We have had a relationship with the courts that counties don't have. They work with us. I go to I haven't gone to conference since 2018, but when I would go and listen to other administrators, wow, the stories they would tell, being sued by the courts, because the courts have to fight for what their needs are. Our courts work with us, and so I'll say thank you to our court administrator and our deputy court administrator and all of our judges. You're lucky. You're very lucky. But if we get into a fight with something, they have to do what they're mandated to do. And Amy and I talked a little bit before. That's a struggle for them. And it will be a struggle for them, but it's a struggle for everybody. And there's impacts going forward in every department. Whether a department gets a cut or not, they're impacted by a department that did get a cut. So just be sure that you understand, we are one team. So we all impact each other. And I think, I call it our road show. When we went out and talked to people, that's what we said time and time again. We talked about how we all impact one another. And we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have today. And we'll do the best with what we can if we end up without resources, because that's the expectation you have. But I'm tired. Right, Ben? Right, Melissa? I am tired.
When I brought up the friend of the court, I had a point.
Oh, good.
I was asking,
sorry.
am I still correct that 75%, because Commissioner Haskell brought up grants and things like that, other funding. Am I still correct that the friend of the court specialists are funded at 75% from federal dollars?
So it's a formula. It's based on time docking, which is, let's talk about that. That's a lot of work for the court and their employees. They have to time dock everything they do. That's then put into the formula, and the formula is 67%.
Okay, because we're also under state mandates that I'm aware of to recoup or process delinquent child support recoupments and associated costs of the child.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of,
Mandate.
yeah, it's mandated. There's a lot of mandates.
Right.
And we're lucky if we have grant funding. We're lucky that the federal government gives us that funding. What if they cut it? Now you're on the hook for paying it if it's still a state mandate. But we're getting, and I'm going to pick on the people that are here, but the deputy court administrator sent me an email, which I'll apologize because I haven't read it completely and responded, but I did talk to the court administrator this morning. There's a mandate they're placing on when we pay a bill, potentially. And the court works with them, but that's a state mandate, when we have to pay a bill. And we have rules of when we pay our bills. And I know that Commissioner Barber has said you pay a bill so the board sees it before it leaves this building. And there are some that we have to pay, like consumers, any utility bill that we have to get out there. But now this would be something potentially that we would have to add to that list to early pay. I mean, it's every day, all of these offices are hit with mandated things that we don't get money for, but we have to do it. It's any law they pass. It's the court, and I'm not knocking on, the Supreme Court, State Court Administrator's Office, but I can tell you, especially when we went through COVID, between COVID and now, the things that the court got hit with every day, day after day, and they're still hit with them. Court administrator and I went through the trial court funding process. That wasn't easy, was it? And we just got another question. There's more to come. They're supposed to have a report to us in October of what that may look like. Probably wouldn't take effect for another year, potentially two, I don't know. But that's a lot of work. We have to stop what we're doing because we have a requirement to finish that because the state put that requirement on us. Every office could tell you what requirements are placed on them that you, as a board, are paying for. And personnel are paying for because they're having to work time to get that done. And they're tired. I'll tell you I'm tired. It's a lot for what we're doing.
Any other questions or comments?
I would like to, if you're agreeable to it, Mr. Chair, I would like for the people who did attend to have the opportunity to speak up because this is a budget. I'm telling them the cuts, and this is the first they're hearing it.
Okay, before we get to that, and this is a perception of the public, and I think it needs to be addressed briefly. We don't need to go into 100 million details, but the influence of American Recovery Act funds and opioid funds on the county, because there's a tremendous misunderstanding as to how those funds were utilized and why they had to be utilized in that way. And if any of the three of you would like to address that, or if you want to put it off to a later date, that's fine.
No, I can address it because I've lived with it and hated it for the last few years. I've told you all that. It was a blessing and it was a curse because you would have, and the past board would have had to take action. But we put things off because we got revenue that's considered lost revenue. We didn't lose that much revenue, I'll tell you that, because we didn't lose a specific thing. People were still having to pay their taxes. So if you go back and look at our taxes, it's not like we lost that. We may have lost some other revenue, but we got $10 million over 3 years, and you can jump in if you want, Melissa. $10 million over 3 years that we were able to balance our budget. That's $3 million a year. That's not a good way to do business, and we know it. But we used it because it was there, because we didn't want to pass that cost on to the residents, to the taxpayers, because they were out of work. They were getting unemployment or not getting unemployment. They were suffering too. So if you would have raised taxes then, you're putting a burden on them again. And you're putting a burden on them now, and they're telling you that. Their paychecks aren't going up. Your employees' paychecks haven't gone up. So that was bad. The remainder of the money had to be spent on certain things. And whether the public likes it or the current board or past board likes how it was spent, Would I have done things differently at the time? Yes, I would have. And we talked about that on our road show, didn't we? I will say first and foremost, the ARPA funds did not go to solar. Solar was the result of energy savings that were done throughout the complex. That was an allowable expense through ARPA. So that money then was supposed to save for us to purchase solar. Solar then was supposed to save. If you look, and I'm not trying to be critical, but I can have you go back and look at a meeting that occurred in 22, where a question was asked to the vendor, and a question was asked again to the vendor, and was asked again to the vendor. And it was the question that, had it been answered by the vendor, probably would have had a better outcome where we wouldn't have done solar. Like it or not, solar's not a bad thing. I'm not opposed to solar, but it ended up being a cost to the county. So, and people aren't going to like it, but this is what transparency is, right? And we've talked about it. If you look at the line, JCI project lease financing, we are obligated to pay, and it's a weird model, $400,000, $453,000, $463,000, $473,000. Then it drops down to an amount because they made an assumption that we would have to spend $150,000 to purchase a chiller. And Chad and our facilities director, Ben, Eric Daly, our technology director, Nathan Nybert, the deputy director, the number of hours over the last 2 years that have been spent by my office, by their offices, trying to look at that model to see what our savings will be, because it's under a 5-year guaranteed savings. And I'm sorry to say it, we're spending money. Yes, we are saving money on our electricity bills. That is easy to tell. We knew that would happen. But it didn't do what it was intended to do. I'm just going to tell you. What we want is that $1.3 million in the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act money. We want that money so we can apply it to those payments. Stick it in a fund, and we make those payments. That's $1.3 million, because that's the right thing to do. Now, typically what they want you to do with that money would be to do some other energy efficiency project to then save more money, but that IRA funding has stopped, and the IRS funding that goes to private companies has stopped. That's been put on hold. We had submitted our application. I don't know if we'll get that. I tend to not be optimistic. Ben keeps me trying to be optimistic. You just have to worry about it. But a lot of work has gone into that. And again, I'll say it, I didn't go to those meetings. And I don't want to be negative toward it because people here voted for it, but what you voted for was not a full picture. It just wasn't. The other thing that we could do was broadband. What we looked at for broadband was at one point it was 3.8 million. Then it dropped down to 2.6. And then the Robin grant that was applied for by an internet service provider didn't go through. So then they created the BEAD funding, federal funding, and that's where they're working now. Our money would have gone to a provider that did not benefit our residents, so we dropped that. So we took that funding and we utilized that toward the Bank Intercounty drain, our share. Because here's the thing with our share. Any portion that the county is obligated to pay, and this has been a time suck too, any portion the county is obligated to pay is spread to every resident in Eaton County because it's our tax dollars. So they're all paying it. not just Delta Township, Delta's paying it as well, but it is spread across the entire county. Just like Carmel Township's drain is spread across the entire county, because we're obligated to pay what's called a drain at large, and the road commission is obligated to pay 50% of what's called a 14A calculation. We have a day of review next Friday that we'll be attending, and we'll get what our final apportionment will be, and we'll see how that goes. But it is a heavy cost. We're looking at close to adding to our existing $600,000 that we're paying right now for our drain at large assessments. Add $300,000. That's not in these numbers. So you're looking at close to $1 million that the county is obligated to pay for that drain. So we were responsible, and we're using that money for a direct cost that we know we're going to be hit with. And Melissa did a lot of work on that. My whole office did a lot of work on that, getting that through. It was a lot. And then again, off the top of that project, we secured $5 million in state funding. So that saved everybody. And then the other ARPA funds went to retention bonuses, which we needed to do at the time because we were losing people and we weren't given pay increases. And if you talk to our employees, they'd tell you it wasn't enough. So I defend the employees. I'm going to tell you it wasn't enough. Sheriff came before you and asked for additional money, and it wasn't passed through here for the public safety, right, and the first responders. I would say that probably dispatch would say the same thing. Money didn't come through. So we did what we could. We paid for any equipment. I can't think of the word, safety equipment. We paid for assistance for foreclosure for the public that was suffering. We paid for some housing services, again, for the public. What am I missing, Melissa? Yeah. So the money doesn't go that far. You're talking about $22 million. You'd think it'd go far, but that JCI, Johnson Controls project, cost a lot of money. And then the solar was not out of that money. That was the added project. And I'm not anti-solar, so don't think that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's a cost to doing that. There's a cost of upkeep. It is what it is. So you're looking at savings, you're looking at energy savings across the board. That's why you get that IRA benefit potentially, if we get it. It's because that's what they want you to do. Federal government wanted you to do that. Did I miss anything? Because I am talking way too much.
And then the opioid funds, that's all
Oh, yeah.
directed money, correct?
So that's directed money. That cannot be used to put into our general fund. The one thing you could do with it, right now it's gone to grants. We gave money to specialty courts, that is for housing. Claudine would have to get up and say everything that we gave. And we went light the first year because we didn't have a lot of applications. We'll have more. There's stuff that you can do in the sheriff's office for the jail, directly related to medication and overdose. We already have Narcan in all of the police vehicles. But those funds are restricted, and you have to make sure you're spending that the way that it's dictated. The only one that is separate from that was the Meyer settlement. But you got $1.5 million, and as a board, you don't want to take that $1.5 million and not use it for what the intended use was, even if you're allowed to. Your goal is to save the people who've been impacted by that crisis. So,
Commissioner Wright.
sorry.
I was just going to ask, I've forgotten. It keeps coming up with the public, the pathways. Where did that money come out of to do the pathways around here?
So that's a big controversy because originally the board had approved $375,000 toward those improvements. It included dealing with the pond, it included creating a path that went back behind the youth facility in the woods, the path that's here. The total dollar amount was around $60,000 that was spent out of the general fund. $60,000 that you could have kept, but I will tell you, the public uses it. We see them walking. Any of the departments that look out back see the public walking on it. That's public. It's kind of like, they're not parks, but it's an area for people to walk. They walk their dogs. It's an area for people, not just employees. And we haven't even spent the money. We didn't do the pavilions, we didn't do any of that. We cut the funding of doing those and the pond. And then Chad Facilities worked with the Conservation District to secure a grant for dealing with the wildflowers that will be planted. And we're doing that in-house because we're lucky our facilities director has experience in doing that. So that's all that went to that.
Right, I just want to make it clear how it was covered.
Yeah. And I'll address the other hot topic. There was a table that was purchased. It was purchased for the sheriff's department. We are about safety here, right? Our finance director saw that table. That table was falling apart. The table that they use it for are for briefings. They have people come into that briefing room. They needed media on that table. It was $9,000. $9,018. Yes. So you're going to say that's a lot of money. It's not like buying a $50,000 wrench, but it is a table they use every day. It's a table that these are officers, command officers, who are dealing with things, frustrated. They use that table every day. You can get angry about it. I can appreciate that. I'm not going to buy a $10,000 table for my house, and that's what everyone's going to say. But this is a table that's used. You want a table that's going to last. The last table they had to have been 20 years old. Well, it had to have been when the expansion was added to the jail. We don't have a lot of fancy tables. We also don't have massage chairs sitting up here. The judges don't have massage chairs. That table was not in the prosecutor's office. It changed from being in the sheriff's office to the prosecutor's office. And it wasn't. The table that his office uses is beat up and has mismatched chairs. They put old chairs in there. And again, the prosecutor's office should be a professional office, right? Go up to his office and look at it. It's a sardine, right? Sardine can. They're just packed in there like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, so.
Thank you for that.
Go off
I had
on
not seen that $10,000 table myself, but it was described to me as one, not just a table, but it's got technology built into it. So
It's a used table.
yeah. So Commissioner Christensen.
I just wanted to touch on what Connie just said because I find it comical. We do have one social media Nazi that thinks our chairs are massage chairs and they're heated and they're air conditioned and they're none of the above. As you can see, they're a basic desk chair. So we don't have $3,500 chairs that everyone thinks the commissioners do have.
Or the judges, they don't.
Exactly. And if you go online to a reputable table company that's going to last a long time, that's cheap for a table. After I got that sent to me, I researched that, and a lot of them are $17,000 and more. So
Yeah.
I think you did well.
And we're not hiding chairs somewhere else. That's what we were told. We were hiding chairs, putting them away, and bringing them out for commissioners when they come in. We're not doing that. First of all, we don't have space to hide anything. We can take you to the basement and show you the old furniture that we have down there. It's a mess. So,
And I will say,
yeah.
there's not a huge market for 70s office furniture. So we've had that recommendation as well. We have not had a lot of success with people jumping up and down to come and buy old equipment from the county. Yeah.
Yeah, we do that, and we can sell online, but again, we
Unless
don't
you
have a
know
lot.
somebody looking for 70s office furniture, in which case please ask them to reach out to the controller's office as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that. Yes, Chairman Mott.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you take this model, the 98 people model, and you extend it out to the 33, 34 budget year, based on these calculations, it looks like to me it's going to be zero.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So even with that best scenario model of saving the county money, we're still at a point where it's you've got to keep cutting employees or something, and this doesn't really take into effect the rising cost of doing business here.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I mean, that's, again, our expenses, whether they're personnel or costs that we have to do business, and people go without, and I'll pick on the people that are here because I know it. The former prosecutor, Jeff Sauter, used to make his staff, and Prosecutor Lloyd would tell you this, if they went to a conference, this is why his budget is 97% personnel. They go to a conference, they get pens. They don't buy pens. That's what they were mandated to do. I mean, that's,
Notepads and pens, right?
yeah, they had to get those from every conference they went to. Please, do you have pens? Please, do you have pens? People aren't spending a lot of money here. We can go through our supplies. They're not. Melissa can get nitpicky and irritate people. Our new finance and purchasing assistant will go online and people get irritated because we question things. That's our job. We're not passing through things that are ridiculous. If it's ridiculous, I'm telling them no way. And that table, to me, Melissa worked on that. We actually brought a budget amendment to this board because we needed additional money for that. So we told the sheriff, you have to bring that, I think it was the chief deputy, to the board to get the approval. So it was not hidden, it was needed, and you approved it. And there's nothing wrong with you having approved it, right? So yeah, you're correct, Chairman Mott. We are not out of the woods unless, tax assessments continue to rise, right?
All right, before we go on to hear from our department heads, does anyone need to take a brief break? Okay, I thought Ben looked a little antsy. Let's pause for about 10 minutes, be back here at 10:40. All right, everyone, are we ready to resume? All right, we are back. Thank you. All right, as promised, we would like to hear from department heads, elected officials, any comments that you may have concerning our budget. Now, I talked to one person who said they were going to come up and speak. I don't want a mob at the podium.
Some of them like to hold back.
Do they? Okay. All right. Pardon?
Did you scare them off?
No, I did not.
Good morning, Commissioners and public in attendance and those, excuse me, viewing at home. My name is Darius Raynette, and I am your Eaton County Treasurer. Excuse me, I have a cold I'm overcoming. Thank you, Connie, and your staff for putting together this budget summary, showing the effects of reducing these positions. I know it must be particularly difficult because, as you said earlier, we're dealing with individuals, not just numbers. I think this presentation, your presentation shows how vital the public service millage is, and that it is a benefit both to the out-county area as well as the more populous areas such as Delta Township. As Eaton County Treasurer, I've tried to remain apolitical, but I think it's incumbent for me to say that this millage certainly is needed. I support it. I'm constantly impressed by, during the 3 months that I've been treasurer so far, I'm really impressed by the dedication of my staff as well as the staff of other departments as they continue to work under very trying difficulty with systems that are outdated, but they continue to provide very good customer service and professional services to the public and other departments. Regarding some of the other supposed excessive expenditures, you know, we don't have any fancy things in my office. You know, our carpets are worn out, the chairs are worn out, and that's okay. We'll make do. There are more things, there are other more important things we need to spend the money towards, such as IT and things like that. But thank you again for your work on this, and I think it's important that this millage passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you to our treasurer. Next up.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking the Controller's Office and all of her amazing staff for putting this presentation together, this information, to try to keep the county going. Having been here since 1989, I know that what they're saying is true, and this information, this whole situation is terrifying for departments like my 4 departments and the whole county, all of the departments. It's come to this, and we are terrified of how we're going to get the work done. But I want to thank the Controller's Office. No one will ever know how many untold hours these people, every one of the people in her office, they're working 24/7 to bring you the information that you need to make an informed decision. And though we don't love the message, I personally am thankful that we finally have the message. It's just been kicked down the road for too long. We are so lucky to have this team working for us. Controller talked about how lucky we are to have great staff. We're so lucky to have this team in place. This administrative team is looking out for all the county residents. So I need people to know that. As I stated last week at our board meeting, my departments are underfunded and have been since 2008. I have statutory requirements that have to be met in all 4 of my offices. They have to be funded at a serviceable level in order for me to get my constitutional duties done. So for the public and for my staff that will likely watch this later, I want to give a message. I have a total of 11 of the most dedicated and highly skilled employees that you could ever ask for. And if you've ever been to any of my offices, county clerk's office, register of deeds, circuit court clerk, and of course our election department, you know what great staff I have. They are so skilled and they have historical knowledge because they've stayed. They are those employees that have stayed through this storm, not because they couldn't make more money elsewhere, but because they have a passion for what they do and they're carrying on that historical knowledge that is desperately necessary in all 4 of these offices. So I'm fortunate to have this staff, beyond fortunate, and so is the public. We are so lucky to have them. The historical knowledge is one of the things that goes away when we can't keep employees due to cuts, or low pay. I was trying to figure what kind of historical knowledge, how many years my staff has, and I have small offices, but we have well over 50 years of combined experience, not counting my 35 years with the county. So keeping trained staff is critical and enough to get these statutory jobs done. If you've ever been to any of my offices, you know how courteous and skilled they are, and I get compliments every month on all 3 offices. So to my staff, you're the greatest. Please stay with us, and we'll fight to find ways. Like Connie, the controller said, the treasurer and I, the courts and I are looking at ways to keep staff by working together. So that's a constant daily preoccupation with me. But having been here, I want to say, again, thank you all. The message today is terrifying. So I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Good morning, Amy Etzel. I'm the court administrator for the child courts. I wasn't expecting to speak today, but similar to Diana's, I appreciate the information today. It's terrifying as an administrator to hear it, but certainly I know for employees who may watch or are watching right now, probably more so for them. So some of the things that we have been doing, and I think the last time I spoke gave some information with regards to what we are doing budgetarily and preparing our budget for next year, and even what we're doing in our existing budget, really taking a hard look at each department. We have left positions open with the anticipation that we're going to be asked to make personnel cuts, and trying to be very transparent with our staff and our departments, and they all know what is happening and what we're making efforts to do, but they are working hard. We appreciate each and every one of them, but as we were talking about cuts and we're talking about looking at what we have done at this point, cuts are being made to a staff level that is, what we have existing right now is bare bones. We have staff who are working in a department that the expectation is they work 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, period. But that doesn't take into account, these are real people who have lives. And so vacations, sick time, medical, family emergencies are not taken into account, those staffing levels. And so when one individual has that happen on any given week or day, it impacts the office. But you have an extended period of time, somebody goes out on a medical leave, a maternity leave. That should be something that we embrace for, our employees. That's a huge impact on a department. And so we want our employees to be taking vacations. We understand situations happen in life, but the levels that we are staffed at now make that near to impossible to manage and maintain on any given day when that happens, and that is being felt by our employees. And so it's difficult, when we're hearing that the potential is there, that more needs to be made. So I know from my perspective and, sending some emails to the judges as we were listening today, as we will be going back and having meetings with our departments to make sure our employees are reassured that we're doing everything we can to maintain them in our, departments, that they are valued, that we appreciate their expertise. But we certainly understand that their feeling is even more compounded based on the discussions today, which I appreciate we're having. We're getting some answers as to where the impacts are going to be felt, but that just heightens the concern and the anxiety from employees. That's inevitable, obviously, but I appreciate all the work I know the controller's office is doing, everybody in her office is doing 24-hour operations at this point. And so I just appreciate the information today, but certainly it's difficult to receive. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Are you gonna go? I'll wait. Yeah.
I'm not gonna argue with it. Good morning. I just wanted to address a few items that came up in regards to some of the facilities and infrastructure projects that we've done in the last couple of years. I'll start off with the solar. So the way that worked, as Controller Sobey mentioned, it was a project that was purchased across the complex for utility upgrades and energy savings program that was the majority of the cost. When it was presented to the board by the vendor, this projected savings was emphasized and stressed, and it was agreed upon at that time that they would move forward with the project. The solar piece was an afterthought. It was added to the project because of the potential savings that was presented and proposed by the vendor. Now, had it been presented differently, I'm sure the board would have probably voted differently at that point. Again, and I also want to say that happened early '22. I came on board July of '22. So I inherited that project as already going. We got going with it. And some of the commissioners have approached me and asked me, I don't do social media, but apparently there's this claim that it doesn't work. It's not working. It's working as designed. We're reducing our energy consumption 30 to 35% to 40% a month. It's the input cost is what is offsetting our savings. So the cost that we incurred to install it is greater than what we are saving, and thus we have a burden going forward for this project. Second, I wanted to talk about the walking trails. That's come up. The walking trails were originally several more parts to the project. We scaled that way back because of perception and some feedback that we were getting, so we didn't do the complete project. I believe it was over $350,000. That funding was pulled from the Parks Department at the time because we had a Parks millage and we thought we could utilize that money to enhance this grounds in a more natural resources like park-like project. That's why that was undertaken. So any misconception with that? And again, we scaled it way back. We did one trail and some improvements around the grounds, and we, I think, $60,000 or $70,000, as Controller Sobey said. So again, that was another thing that's been misrepresented amongst social media, what I've heard. The carpet here at the courthouse is another one that has been brought to my attention. In a commercial building, the carpet ought to be replaced. It's recommended, a quick Google search will tell you, 5 to 10 years is the lifespan. Everything has a lifespan. And it hadn't been replaced in decades. We did the second floor common areas, which is just the hallways and corridors. And we did the first floor common areas. The lower level, we did not do because of funding. We did the most trafficked areas. It still needs to be done. All of the suites need to be recarpeted. These are things that we've deferred over time. So that is why we chose to do the carpet in the manner we did. And finally, the conference table at the sheriff's office. I've seen the conference table. My team ran the electrical wiring to it. So the conference table is probably, and I'm just guessing, 10 to 12 feet long. I don't know how many people it seats, but it's a long table. There's technology in two spots where electrical and technology come into it, where they can, right at the top of the desk, utilize the technology as well as electrical. That's very common in all conference rooms across the region. Is every experience I've had, that's very common. And I don't know the specific costs. Somebody mentioned that's a low-end cost, when I believe that. So I just wanted to clear up a few things that have come up today that I've been directly involved with, that have been misconceived or misrepresented. And I wanted to share that with you all and as well as the people listening. So if anybody has any questions on that, I can answer, but thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Good morning. So I'm going to share some words that I've had with a number of employees over the past few weeks. And, you know, as your HR representative and deputy administrator, I just want to say that we have a hard path ahead of us as a county. We're in one county, though, and we're all in this together. In times of crisis, people look to each other for direction, comfort, and leadership. And that doesn't just go to people with job titles and people with command ranks. We have so many leaders within Eaton County that we have to be proud of that are in every office. And so I've been asking employees, it's easy to make a cutting comment, to go for a cheap criticism, whether it's something like carpets that we budgeted for 2 years in advance and we didn't just stop because that was a necessary improvement. Before you make comments like that, ask, am I helping the situation when I make a comment like this? Am I feeding other people's anxiety? Am I helping with myself? And if it's not, redirect that energy into something that's going to help us get through this as a group. If you have concerns, schedule a time, meet with your director or elected official, tell them what you're feeling. You know, it's a fact that when people get fearful or angry, parts of our brain shut down. You know, and right now you have a lot of people that are in segments of that, and that's okay. You're not alone, but follow your chain of command. Try to work through those pieces, because a lot of times inter-office pieces are just a lack of communication at that level. So we encourage employees to keep in mind, we're fighting for you, we're fighting for the whole county. Follow that process. I'll note, if you email our office and it's a Ways and Means week, whether it's a special Ways and Means like this one or the traditional one or a full board meeting, we are busy. And this is because we are doing a ton of work on this. So it may take a couple days for us to get back to you. So again, trust the process. Please be patient. Hop stepping and emailing somebody else in our office because you didn't get a quick enough response from the other one does not help does not help speed up the ability for us to respond to you guys. So I know for a lot of offices, they're not on the cycle of committee meetings like the controller's office is. So I want everybody to have that sense, employees, this is the cycle of work that we have to deal with. And again, we encourage you, use your chain of command, schedule time to meet with your directors. Sometimes if you haven't talked to your director, it's difficult for me to take that conversation. I need to trust that the people that we have in positions of leadership within our organization are able to help you, and you need to trust that too. If you have evidence to the contrary, that's what we're here for, but you should exhaust that process first, because we do not have the HR capacity to step into every single office and be there and be present. You have exactly 2 HR people managing an organization of about 416 FTEs. That's helping with payroll, that's helping with medical benefits, that's helping with every facet of employee compensation. We are not structured heavy to micromanage our departments, and that's why we're putting that to the employees. We're gonna get through this. Come together. And I will say, be patient with everyone. as we work through this. Being at odds does not improve the work that lies before us. Different people handle stress and change in different ways, and as much grace as we can have for one another will go a long way in this time. And not just for ourselves, but for our coworkers and other offices as well. And the last thing I would ask the chair if, for consideration, would be reinforcement from commissioners. This was a lot of information given to you today. It might be helpful for the employees that couldn't be here or might be watching or watch later. Just getting a reinforcement of commitment from you all. What are your thoughts as you approach this process? Maybe outline 1 or 2 priorities that you want as you approach this, if it's like deliberative or outcome focused. And then the other piece would be a word to the employees, just so that they know what's on your mind. I mean, you are the 15 that ultimately have to make the tough decisions, and so I think that would be a helpful capstone to this whole exercise today, if the chair would indulge.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben.
Anybody else? You wanna go, Logan?
Hello, I'm the communications director. I do work in the controller's office, and I just want to speak to one quick thing that I noticed throughout this meeting and a few other meetings. You know, I've been here approaching 2 years this summer. And coming in here, I was hired to build a communications department. I'm a department of 1. I do work in the controller's office. We do our best to try and build trust with residents, and they are angry. And they're angry because the county has not been able to communicate the financial cliff, the danger that we were on in an effective way. We just haven't been able to build that trust. We've taken great steps in doing it, but people are frustrated. And yes, some folks do believe misconceptions, misinformation, wrong information, or they make conjectures and they think that they're right. But that's something I want you guys as elected officials to always remember. They do most likely think that they're right, you know. So I want us to be cautious against, for lack of a better phrase, bullying the bully that is, you know, disparaging at us, you know. And I'm one of those positions that was new. I'm one of the ones that often gets doxxed online. That happens. That's expected because they're frustrated. But we're talking to them now. We're going to build that trust. We've taken great strides, but there's a lot more work to do. And so please continue. I've seen commissioners online doing a great job. You know, that's not actually true. Here's a public meeting. Here's who you can reach out to. Continue to do that. But don't arm wrestle folks when they believe in their convictions, and we know you do too. They don't have the information you have because they weren't always told where to get it, how to get it, or how to understand it. And then one last thing I want to say too is to thank Connie, like everybody else frickin' does. But they should. They should. I'm in her office, and me, Ben, Claudine, Melissa, we're there day in and night, and I'm not just trying to get a pity party up here, but, you know, I've only been here 2 years. You guys are so freaking lucky she hasn't bailed. It's insane, the amount of work she does, and she didn't have to take this job. She took it knowing we're in danger here, we're in trouble. She took it to try and save this county as best she could, influence it in the best way, and to fight for the staff that's here. And it hasn't been easy, and it's not gonna be. It's gonna get harder, actually. But I just want to thank Connie. She's super mad at me right now for doing this. But she is here, you know, day in and day out, and at night, you know. And as much as I want to complain about all the hours that I put in, it's nothing compared to her, compared to Melissa. So, you know, through this budget cycle, I hope any staff watching this in other departments, as Ben said, we're grinding too, and you know, the weight is pretty damn heavy. Thank you.
Thank you, Logan.
Hi, I'm Kelly Cunningham, the Eaton County 911 Director. So I am in a position where I have a millage that funds my 911 center. So I am fortunate that I do have that, and then we also have a radio surcharge that covers our radios, towers, our radio project. So I am fortunate. However, we're still part of the county and we're a team. So this is also hurting us. You know, just same thing of things weren't properly maintained kind of building-wise, my carpet. It's gonna start getting humid and it's gonna start bubbling, and it has been there, I've almost been there for 20 years, and it is the same carpet that when I started, and it is not pretty. So, you know, the services that we receive from the county are outstanding, and I do fear what that is going to look like in the future with HR, technology services, our maintenance, because at the end of the day, I still have a 911 center to run, and even if the public safety millage does not pass, I still have calls coming in. They're not gonna stop. And if you look at the difference between what MSP takes and the sheriff's department, we're looking at 30,000 calls. That's 30,000 calls that I need to figure out who we're sending to. And, you know, I have always taken the theory of I have two types of customers in my business here, and that is the agencies we serve, and then also the citizens of Eaton County. And we pride ourselves on excellent customer service and getting them the resources they need in a timely fashion. And my fear is what is that going to look like? And how many of my staff may feel a little helpless as our calls just stack. You know, Eaton County is fortunate enough that it is very rare in a day that we have calls holding. So we manage our resources, we get the calls out to the people that need them, and they get it taken care of. And this could look very different. Also, we, you know, part of the millage and the radios are, we provide the computers in their vehicles, and technology services, they put all those computers in there, take them out. That's a lot of computers to deal with the sheriff's department, and if Delta were to have to start their own department, then we're having to work on getting MCTs and radios for their cars. And I know we'll figure it out. Whatever, we roll with the punches, right? But just because we're funded right now doesn't mean that we're not scared and we don't know what the future looks like. So we are as much a part of the Eaton County team as everyone else that may not have a special millage, and we're feeling it and we're worried too. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Good morning, Doug Lloyd, Eaton County Prosecutor. Yeah, I've tried to think of what exactly I should say today. Couple of things that I think need to be said. You know, Controller Sobey did a wonderful job of laying this out, and I know that she didn't do it alone. Your controller's office is small for all the work they have to do. What you need to remember is that controller's office actually works for you. While you control my budget and you control the budgets of the other elected officials, you don't control us. The controller's office actually works for you. So everything that she did was for you. And that is bothersome to me if Controller Sobey or Logan, who tries to shield her from social media, gets to observe people who have taken the time to Monday morning quarterback her conversations or discussion today by saying somehow that it wasn't something that should have been done or it should have been done something differently, and they attack her. That is wrong. Because at the end of the day, you're the 15 elected officials that should be doing something about it. And a lot of you have sat on this board, some of you back in the times that I've been here, the Controller Sobey's been here, the Clerk Bosworth's been here, where we suffered cuts already. And so it will be your time. I've heard the comments from y'all separately, individually, about your feelings on the budget. Well, guess what? I'm already getting text from employees of mine and employees that aren't mine, wondering what the hell is going on. And I'm sending it right back to the 15 of you. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be the 15 of you, not their office, not Controller Selby. It's going to be the 15 of you who make those cuts. You're going to swing the axe, not them. And so that needs to be made clear. And you should make it clear. Stand up. You decided to apply for this job. Lord knows when I sit there and look at myself on social media and they call me corrupt and they call my office corrupt and they say everything bad about our office and how we don't do our job. Well, you know, I made that decision to go to Clerk Bosworth and sign the piece of paper to be on the ballot. So did you. So stand up and do the right thing. Because I will comment, it's funny and interesting today that I walked out for a second, and when we talk about public safety, here's a great example that the courts, the judges had civil court today, and a matter happens there where an individual gets upset. Now, the courts aren't funded enough to actually have armed officers in the courtroom. Go to a lot of courts across the state, and an actual armed officer is in every courtroom that they have. We don't. We have an individual who works at the front of the courthouse who is called up if it's necessary. And he and another officer were called up to a courtroom to have to escort an individual out. And so I asked the question, is this a criminal matter? And they're like, well, it's about to become one because of the individual's actions. So public safety, right there. The courts, the sheriff, and myself were all about to intertwine on something that had nothing to do with the sheriff or my office in the beginning. And in reality, I'm sure the courts didn't want it to go down that process either. But that's what public safety is about. Controller Sobey gave the example or said, you know, a story that I had told her. How many of y'all have seen Yellowstone? Have you seen it? You raise your hands if you've seen it. All right, well, if you hadn't, in the show Yellowstone, there is a place called the train station. It is a county adjacent to the Yellowstone Ranch that has no population, and because it has no population, therefore it has no law enforcement and no courts. And so that is the place that when a person needs to be lost, they are lost. And when they are taken there, it's called being taken to the train station. In the last month, I have had 2 bodies dropped in Eaton County. Both, by the way, in the Out County. And I had a large meeting earlier this week where the Lansing Police Department, the Michigan State Police Department, the Eaton County Sheriff's Department, the Ingham County Prosecutor, and the Eaton County Prosecutor were all present for this. As we discussed, Eaton County becoming the train station. Because what we are saying to the citizens is that we will not have law enforcement, and so we are now easy pickings. How do I know that? Well, earlier this week, we had an armed robbery in Grand Ledge where an individual decided to use Facebook to obtain a vehicle from somebody else by force. This is what is happening in our community. This is what is being spread. And after today, if this millage does not pass, this will be our reality. That's on you, the 15 of you. So do the employees a favor. Actually say something, speak up. I think you asked something like 8 questions. Connie spoke for over 30 minutes, plus addendums. So she probably hit 45 minutes. no offense, Controller Selby, but it's true, and y'all asked 7 questions. None of y'all knew. You've all been here. I mean, Commissioner Barber, you're new, but you had an idea what was going on before you took this job. None of you are new. I'd really think that you would have a lot more in-depth questions, because I can tell you this, the employees are texting me right now with a lot more in-depth questions than y'all asked today. So do the employees a favor. Do the electeds a favor, because we got to go back and talk to our employees. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know where you're going. Because if we got to start telling employees that they should be looking across the county line, we should be doing it now. It's only fair to them. They're our family. We have to watch them too. Commissioner Mott, Controller Sobey, and myself have spent the last year saying the same thing, that it's about family. But the biggest thing to me hearing today was, I can remember Commissioner Mott speaking about sitting back waiting for one of y'all's meetings in the back parking lot at 5 o'clock when it was time to leave, and counting 1, 2, 3, gone of the employees here in Eaton County. And now that's exactly what we're talking today. So once again, Chairman DeRosa, I appreciate you allowing me to speak, but I would request from Ways and Means as well as the board, because I asked the same question at the board meeting last month. At least 4 of you chose to remain silent and not say a word as to your thoughts of this pending action or the millage itself. And if I'm paying attention, I can guess that there's a lot of others paying attention as well. So I would request that you actually do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prosecutor Lloyd. Anyone else like to speak? All right. Any comments, questions from the board here? Commissioner Haskell.
Yeah, I spoke up last time. I'll speak up again. I've obviously been communicating as widely as I can. I'm trying to advocate for this millage to pass. Ben, to your point about looking forward in directions and expectations that I think going from here, I shared a few things that I think would help me communicate. I saw you taking notes on that, and I appreciate it. I think, there's a small part of me that has some guilt for asking for this meeting, because I know it is hard for the staff, but I think today was necessary, and I look forward to trying to make sure that the right side of this page doesn't have to come to fruition.
Commissioner Whitaker.
Thank you. I just am wondering if just about everything here is contingent on the election on May 6th. Is there any kind of a strategy to inform staff and have a sense of what's going on and before then? I mean, I know that it's like that day is going to change everything, but is there something that we can be doing, or are you planning on doing anything like preemptive or with staff and planning and all that stuff so that they can know something more right now as opposed to waiting till May? I know that's a lot to ask, but.
It's not a lot to ask, but you have to remember we're dealing with elected officials. So they take care, and they should, of their employees. So you heard from all of them today, those that are here, who said they're going to go back and they're going to talk to their staff. Their staff are texting them. That is their responsibility. I don't step on that because I'm not going to say something to their employees that I haven't worked through with them, because they were elected to do that job. Now, I met, it could have been 3 weeks ago. Was it this week, last week? I met with the people who are the direct reports to me, those that could be there in a group and those that I had to meet with individually, and we had this discussion. So we're doing that. Again, the positions that were picked were wide and across the county. So I didn't pick positions. I picked vacancies because that was easy. Not that the employees that work in those offices that have vacancies are going to be happy because they will be working harder and they may not want to do it. You know, again, everyone has told you they're tired, but we're communicating. I just feel, and if they feel differently, that they need to do that as far as the elected officials, the courts, and what I'm communicating to you and what I'm communicating to my directors, and they should be talking to their employees, is this story. But we've been doing that for the last 2 years. And we answer questions by employees. We do get questions. You might get the question about the $10,000 table. You get a question about, should we have put carpet in? Could we eliminate something? They're valid questions, and we can do those things, but I am telling you, none of those things change this picture. So yes, communication is what we'll do. We have an executive team meeting next week that we'll all sit down and talk. And then we changed our May meeting, so it is now the day after. It's always the first Tuesday of the month, so that we can discuss what happened after the May election. But we're communicating. But right now, having like a town hall for our employees, we've had those discussions. It's pretty volatile for them right now. So I can't have an expectation that anything I'm going to say to them is going to help them, because frankly, we're the enemy, right? This board's the enemy. I'm the enemy. My office is the enemy. I don't blame them for being mad. And it's just like, to Logan's point with the public. I say that about Facebook. I don't monitor Facebook. And again, some people come and tell me things, and Logan gets angry because you shouldn't have told her that. She doesn't need to know it. Because then I want to say, what should we say that? But you don't want to respond, in my opinion, to people who are upset. And I've said it all along, and I said it at every dang meeting that we went to. We didn't talk to you, to the public. We did not talk to you. And it's a shame. And that's why Logan was hired. Now, was he hired at a time that we're falling apart? Yes. He should have been hired 10 years ago. We would not be where we are today with the public irritated with us. And they should be irritated. And what they see online are the financial statements. They don't understand how to read them. Some of them do, because they've seen them. But you can't have an expectation that these individuals are going to read that and they're going to understand what that means, what the purpose of that is. Same with employees. So you see a fund balance there. It might be assets. It's not cash. It's not money that we can spend, but we can sell buildings. And I've had a discussion with Commissioner Barber. We've had discussions. There are buildings we could sell if we could get someone to buy them. But I'll give a very sad situation right now. This is really sad. We can sell medical care facility. Do any of you want to privatize that? May you have to? Sure. We can get money for it. They'll privatize it, and it will no longer be a 5-star facility, because that's what Martha Richard has done with that facility. And she brings in programs, so she only needs $150,000. And then at one point, she needed a front load of cash due to payments that weren't coming in. But these are cuts that we could make, selling anything that we can sell. But again, those are things that we would sell, put in our budget as a one-time static increase to fund balance, but it's just there. You can't spend it if you want to maintain a fund balance. So you can't take that and say, oh, we'll add employees. That's not responsible. I wouldn't recommend that. And that's what your employees are mad about, because they think if we don't spend this, we could keep an employee. If we don't do this, we can keep an employee. It doesn't, that's not how it works. By spending $1, you can't save an employee that costs $1. It just doesn't work that way. So we're working, Commissioner Whitaker, we are working.
I believe you.
But I'm very respectful of the elected officials and the courts, because their situation is a lot, it's a lot more difficult. Number one, they were elected by the people. They serve this entire county, and their employees rely on them because they serve the county.
And then I'll add too, so we regularly hold monthly staff meetings with executive leadership, which is made up of electeds and director level. So there's a consistent communication going on, again, following the chain of command structure, because we don't have the staff capacity to attend individual staff meetings at every department we have. When we were preparing for November, we took time and we hosted, I think, about 8 or 9 employee town halls. And we met with every employee group, and part of that was to give them a advanced notice, this is gonna be a rough year. And that didn't just end in November, that continued on, and unfortunately, we don't have the resources at this junction to host another round of those town halls, but to Connie's point, I think if we did, we right now don't have the answers, and I will tell you, we will probably never present information to this level of specificity to any employee groups before your eyes see it as commissioners. So our priority is to make sure that the discussions can happen here, because we shouldn't be reporting out to staff until we get a sense where you guys are at, because that's gonna be the first question we get from staff. They're gonna wanna know, right?
Thank you.
Commissioner Wright.
Okay, I also spoke out at the last meeting, but I got a few things I'd like to put on the record. One was I was here back in 2008, and when we had to do those cuts. I know that I attended 2 employee meetings that Joe Brailer, who was chair at the time, held to talk to our employees about how bad it was, and I stood right by his side. We held it downstairs in the basement. At that point, we talked about salaries and the cost of health care. And the one way that we could have retained all those people was by cutting health care, because that's when we were double-digiting increases in the cost of our health care. So the good people of District 5 unelected me in the November 2010 election, and then I tried to get back in 2012, did not make it. I did get back in the November 16th, so here I am, and I do have a memory of some things that have happened in the past that we have been struggling all this time. Okay, the next one is, when I left the last Ways and Means meeting on Friday, I ended up in Brian Reed's manager's office over to Delta Township. I never sat down at his desk. I asked him if he watched the meeting, and if not, it was on YouTube, and you might want to start with the 2025-26 budget, and I walked out. So it's not me. I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm going to tell you where the information is so that you can educate yourself as to the situation here that I am aware of. And I am always going to be asking our administration. I do know the department heads. I walked down the same halls with them all these years. So I know what's going on. The next one, and I didn't make it out of the parking lot, by the way, before I was emailing Delta Township elected official as to, did you watch it? And if you didn't, get on YouTube, because it's there. I am not being quiet. The other one is, because I want you people to understand what really is going to happen. Now, I can't tell you what's going to happen at your kitchen table. That's up to you. And the absentee ballots came out yesterday into the mailboxes. I know in Delta Township that Mary Clark dropped them. So you're going to have those on Saturday. And you voters and everybody else that's involved, pass the word, because your vote counts, but also not voting counts as to what going to be the status in this county and your service level. Anyway, and then the last one that I want to talk about is, yes, it is up to us as 15 county commissioners to approve a budget. However, come September 30th, you have to have a balanced budget on file at the state of Michigan. That is not something that's arbitrary. You can't just kick it down the road. We are not the federal government. We have rules and obligations. So when we talk about this, it's up to the voters. So when you find out how this goes and how this 15-member board has to vote, it's been up to your voters. So you need to educate them. I don't know how you want to choose to do it, but I asked Logan Bailey to send me something that I could put on for this special meeting, and he created me a page that I could upload to my personal Facebook, which goes all over the county to people I know, and also to my open public county commissioner page. And that goes to everybody, not just my friends. It's listed as public, and y'all can look at my Facebook page and see how I am explaining things, and good things. Good things. We do good things. I post everything, okay? So thank you very much for your time, and I do appreciate it. I don't know what more we can do to get people educated. I know that everybody's put in their time. They're hard workers. The department heads that I really know, I just really do appreciate them. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
My turn.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go to public comment in just a moment. When we had our booth at the fair, there were a few people, and I see it pop up on social media occasionally still, that we haven't cut enough in the county. And I want them to know that since I took this seat in January 2017, we were on continuation budgets at that point. And we've cut, and we've cut, and we've pushed back, and now we're at the point with our budget where we have to either pass a millage or reduce our staff, as was presented this morning. And it's not fun. And for people to come out of the woodwork and say, well, you're corrupt and you haven't. We have. And I agree, you can't always throw numbers out at people and help them to understand, but they need to understand. And I try to direct people to watch these meetings, but we have cut as much as we can cut. We can't, if we could save road patrol by getting rid of all the vehicles, and by golly, we would do it, but then you'd have deputies walking. And that doesn't work. And public safety is an absolute, as Prosecutor Lloyd pointed out, and if you look at the things that have been going on in the county in the last few years, it wasn't just the 2 bodies they found this month, but it bothers me that people, I don't want to say don't want to understand where we're at, but they haven't gone and done the research. I think there's too much conjecture and rumors out there, and that's what we're up against right now. And it's, we've said it in here before, you can talk to people, they've got their mind made up, they know what they're gonna do. Well, fine, that's fine. If you've made up your mind, you know what you're gonna do. But understand that the next step in this comes after the election in May, and what we're gonna do in the following months to prepare for the next budget cycle. That will mean if it fails, if the millage fails, that we will be without. Whatever it is we're gonna be without that service and those people. And it's gonna be very difficult to recover from that. And I had one guy call me on the phone after a little back and forth texting, and he called me on my phone and threatened, said, you're gonna lose your position over this. Well, fine, if I can save something and lose my seat, I'm good with that. We're gonna work hard for the next 4 years. I don't know what it's gonna look like. I wanna be optimistic. So I absolutely support this public safety millage. And I will do what I can to convince people that it is the absolute necessary thing to do. I understand the increase in costs. I understand the increase in taxes. The commissioners don't live tax-free. We don't get things handed to us. And while these chairs are somewhat comfortable, they're not the chairs that we're rumored to have, which is just silliness. And I think the silliness needs to stop in our public and get down to what's really going on here. So that's all I have. Any public comment? All right, seeing none, if there's no other comments or questions from anyone, we are adjourned.